And welcome to the Steelers Depot live stream here on this Monday, April 3rd, the first full week here of April. As always, Alex Kazor, Dave Bryan here with you guys until 8 p.m. Eastern Time, answering all of your Steelers questions. Dave, how you doing? Good to be back with you.
Happy Monday, and thank you for everybody who is in the chat already and listening. Glad to have you.
Yep, got a good number in the chat, so just give me 1 second to pull up the stream on my end so I can see all the questions, and then Dave and I will get to answering them as we are busy with pro days wrapping up, pre-draft visits, a little bit of free agency talk since we last had our live stream. Reminder, Dave and I will try to answer as many and hopefully all questions until the top of the hour, although there is no guarantee of that. If you want a guarantee of your question being asked and answered by Dave and myself, be sure to send us a super chat. No obligation, but that does move you to the front of the line. Also, you guys could like the stream. Would really appreciate that and get more people into the live stream. So we'll start things off with our first question from our friend Mike Cadesso, who says, "Hi guys, good discussion Friday podcast on realistic guys at 17, but here I am again reminding you that Jackson Smith and Jigba shouldn't be counted out there. If we're going to mock at right tackle at 17, why not a wide receiver that checks all the boxes?" Fair point overall on him. He does check all the boxes. Shouldn't be discounted. I guess I personally, and maybe this is my own bias clouding it, I'm kind of putting him in that Lucas Van Ness box of he checks the boxes. I just don't think he'll be the pick. But you're right, in terms of, removing my own thoughts here for a second, and just in terms of first-round guy, Tomlin calling out the pro day, he does fit.
Yeah, I think it's plausible, for sure. Talented kid, too. Especially go back a couple years ago, right, to his college tape. At the time, I remember thinking to myself, man, is that kid going to be the top wide receiver in the class, So yeah, I mean, you're at the pro day, and we'll obviously see if they bring him in for a visit, but not uber necessary for him to be the pick at this point. Obviously, Power Five. We'll have to see where he fits in. I would imagine he's going to match most of the boxes on the Alex Kazora, what the Steelers look for criteria. I've just been kind of thinking, for a little while now that he might be one of those guys that'll be off the board too.
Yeah, I think he'll be in the mix to be the first receiver taken. Right around in that range, in that 15 to 20 mark is kind of where I think the first one, whoever that is, whether it's Johnston from TCU or JSN or Jordan Addison, Zay Flowers, probably going to be in that area. I just, given the history of not taking receivers that often in the first round, given the fact it's a slot type receiver, I know there's a need there, but is that the first-round guy? Again, I can't discount it. I won't discount it. His name will be included whenever we do kind of our article later this month on the names to watch for at 17. I just think it's less likely than the other options.
That would blow a lot of people's minds, overall, if they did take a wide receiver in the first round, right?
Oh yeah, including mine. Brian Jonker says thumbs up to Alex, and he'll be back. So hopefully you're back in the chat by now. Got a question about Pittsburgh still trying to upgrade the interior offensive line. Didn't think Cole was bad last year. I have a video that just went up a short time ago, just briefly outlining Mason Cole. We'll see. I really don't know where Pittsburgh wants to go. I mean, you would think they're good along the interior in terms of starters, but we'll find out how they feel about Mason Cole.
Yeah, look, you look at some of the the pro day action that they've had, and it leads you to believe that nobody should be shocked if they do draft a more center-like, capable player at some point during this draft. So, I mean, I'm with you. I think Mason Cole did an admirable job. I think they can start him again this season, and I think they can have success with him. But on top of it, this team right now only has who's it? Ryan, who's McCollum?
Yep.
Technically, the only true. I mean, depending on what you want to call James Daniel, obviously, but and his capability there. But right now, McCollum's really the only kind of carryover from last year that probably saw snaps at center in practice, and of course, he was on the practice squad. So it's just hard to kind of when you're doing a mock draft or trying to figure out where they might take one, that's where it becomes difficult, especially if they do wind up taking a tackle early in this draft, you know.
And this is the time where I pester you. When's your first mock draft? Are you only going to do one this year? You're going to do
I
your
don't know.
classic two?
I got so much stuff, you know, trying to do with the site and stuff like that that people don't see, and you know, trying to chip in writing when I can. So it'll get done when it gets done. I'll have at least one,
Okay,
the
at
final one.
least one.
So we'll see if I can't pound out another one before then.
If they draft an interior guy, I still don't know what their plan is going to be out of the gate. Just back up, just pure depth and extreme depth, or really compete with Cole or something else. I'm just not quite sure what that plan would be.
Yeah, that's the hard part. Now, obviously, if you drafted one with one of the first two picks, then you would expect him to compete and potentially even open the season as a starter. But as much as it would probably surprise a lot of folks if they drafted a wide receiver with their first pick, I think it would be just as, you know, surprising if they took a center with one of the first two picks. You know,
Yeah.
so that's what makes it challenging. Is, you know, if they where would they potentially pick a center at? You would I think you would guess that it would be maybe round 3 or later. And if they did, what does the plan? You know, how serious of a chance would that player get to actually push Mason Cole for the job, at least to start the season?
Sure, but the guys they've looked at are second-round guys. Steve Avila, John Michael Schmitz, who may be a round 1 guy, Cody
Now,
Mock.
center does usually somehow, it just seems over the years, center gets pushed down, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll have to wait and see, but I'm really kind of, chewing on that one, trying to figure out what this team's plan might be. Got a question here from Jonathan Mason. True or false? If Paris Johnson Jr. makes it to 12, the Steelers will trade up to get him, and if they do, what do you think it'll take? Putting aside the compensation, if Pittsburgh were to trade up, would they go after somebody like a Paris Johnson Jr.?
Well, yeah, like I think we've talked a couple of times on the podcast. The one player that I could see having the most, probability for the Steelers to trade up for would be, I think, Paris Johnson. But I mean, if you're talking going 17 to what do you say, 12?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 12.
I mean, that's probably gonna cost the first and the second, right?
I'd have to look at the trade value chart. Could you swing, just pick 80 to go up 5? I'd have to look, maybe 49. I don't have the math in front of me.
All right. But I mean, if they did move up, I would think it would be for a guy like Paris Johnson, period.
Yeah.
End of story.
I'll have an article talking about that a bit more in the morning on Steelers Depot, some trade-up candidates, really just to me 2 names. Just a reminder, if you guys could like the stream, got 72 people here, really appreciate that. Also, apparently 72 comments on Jonathan Hightrader's new mock draft. So it is some Steelers football faith for you guys to go check out Jonathan's Monday mock. Back to the questions. Bruce Myers. A lot of people think the Steelers will draft a wide receiver somewhere in this draft, but my question is, wouldn't a tight end be better than a 4th wide receiver? I don't know if it'd be a 4th wide receiver. Right now you got 2 guys in Deontay Johnson and George Pickens. They're pretty established. From there, I think it's open. Now, Calvin Austin, obviously, I think is who Bruce is referring to, but this guy's never played an NFL down in preseason or, of course, regular season action. So you don't want to hand this guy anything and just make Austin your automatic number 3. And my thought is, get another receiver in there. If Calvin Austin is good, then you have 2 good receivers, and that's a good problem to have in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, and nothing says that you can't get both Calvin Austin III and whoever you drafted playing time, especially if they're kind of different body types, and especially if and you would think that if they did draft a wide receiver specifically, maybe in the first 4 rounds, that it probably wouldn't be. It would be one that would have some versatility within him and all as well too. So I don't think you can just look at a receiver that they would potentially grab, especially in the first, let's say, 4 rounds, as one that would, be the full-time number 3. I would think that they'd find a way to maybe platoon with Calvin Austin the third. But yeah, as I've stated since the season ended, I mean, you fortunately, Alex, you got to see a little bit of Calvin Austin the third in training camp. I'm still going off of his tape at Memphis. And that's all I have to go on at this point. So people say, "Oh, Dave's down on Calvin Austin the third." No, I'm not down on him. I just haven't seen him. How can I paint a rosy picture about him when I haven't even seen him take a snap in a Steelers uniform yet? So, but he is a little bit on the smaller side there as well too. So, yeah, I would. I like the probability of this team drafting a wide receiver at some point, and I would suspect that he'd be a little bit bigger than Calvin Austin is, and probably have some versatility to him. And that's kind of the stance that I've had all off season when it comes to that.
Yeah, I think he'll be versatile. I still have another dilemma with where and who and who's the best fit overall. But you want to have good depth at receiver. Somebody's going to get hurt at some point. You can't just be three deep, and really those are three starters, and expect to survive a season that way. Just the way that Pittsburgh is adding their offensive line depth. I'm not counting on the incredible health they had with their front five last year. Can't count on that really at any position, and that includes wide receiver. Got a question from a fellow Alex. How do the Steelers fix their yak problem? Dave, how does Pittsburgh fix their yak problem?
For one, you can start delivering the football to these wide receivers on routes that help facilitate more yak instead of a lot of these outs or curls. And I had a couple of posts on that. At least one for sure. I know last year, and I think that played quite a bit into a guy like Deontay Johnson, for instance, there, and his lack of yak. But you got to build more. You got to start building some more slants into this thing. Some more in cutting routes a little bit deeper down the field instead of just playing, a lot of curls, a lot of comebacks, a lot of out routes. That would help first and foremost. And second is, having a player that shows, good ability to be able to deliver that yak. Now, one thing talking about Calvin Austin the third, him coming out, boy, he was fantastic. After the catch at Memphis and broke off a lot of receptions that way. But you're not going to get those by constantly throwing, comebacks and curls and out routes and all like that. There's not going to be many opportunities for a receiver to break one for considerable yak there. And look, you go back to what this team did last year. I mean, that number's got to come up. It absolutely has to come up. And I think you can help facilitate that with some of these routes that you're delivering the football to on.
Yeah, I think in large part the answer is schematically. It's not the only answer, but it's the biggest part of that. And a lot of those, the lack of yak was just the limitations of all the sprint outs and out routes and just not allowing guys to do damage after the catch. The lack of slants we noted throughout last season. And so you don't have those kind of routes that allow yak, you're not going to get yak. It's pretty simple. Joe Glusco says, true or false? Got a lot of true or falses today. The biggest need on this roster is corner. Man, that is a tough one. Is it corner or D-line?
I'm saying false.
What's the biggest need then?
I would say, defensive line is where I would start.
That's where my first thought was at, and I've said that throughout the offseason. You did at least re-sign Larry Ogunjobi. You brought a Fehoko on the roster just for some cheap run depth. And with corner, we had this conversation today about the slot corner. I really don't know who that's going to be. Outside corner, Patrick Peterson, is going to be there, but for how long and how good is he going to be? And then you look at next year, what you have, a lot of guys hitting for agency, and Levi Wallace and Arthur Millette and Akella Witherspoon and James Pierre. I might say corner, just given the really big question there in the slot and the big question there in terms of lack of athleticism overall, the lack of speed, and the future that you're going to need guys there in 2024. So it's real close to me. I'm not going to twist your arm if someone says D-line, but I might go cornerback right now.
I do have a built-in bias though when it comes to a cornerback in the first round. Not as heavy of a bias as it was against running back. I don't. Especially if you got if you got a good cornerback that ends up ends up being a lockdown cornerback, you can obviously milk that for and play that several years without a doubt there. But man, I'm old school. The closer to the line of scrimmage, the better.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. Let me just go ahead and pull up the chat. It kind of froze for a second. There was a super chat in here that I missed. I apologize. The live chat on my end is being a little weird right now, and I just lost where that super chat went. Okay, it was from LV for a $2 super chat, so thank you for that. It says, Game 5, offense sucks, Matt C. fire. That is the worst haiku. No, I'm kidding. So he's saying, okay, 5 games into the year, the offense is bad. Is Canada fired? This is probably a record for the earliest Canada fired question that we've gotten, and it's a heavy competition. I don't know. I mean, Pittsburgh's history of firing coordinators is rare. I'm not sure when the last time that happened in season was. So it depends on what the issue is. Is it injuries? Is it player? Is it schematic? It's always a combination, probably thereof. But what's the driving force behind it? So my guess is no, but that's it's a broad-based question.
Yeah, there's so many, as you mentioned, there's so many variables involved within that, and it's not like they would go out and get probably a coordinator outside the organization. So you're back to kind of really, dealing with potentially the same choice you had last year, which would be Mike Sullivan, right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, typically,
had they gone out and got a passing game or a guy like Leftwich or somebody like that, who people were hollering for, maybe that would add a little bit more mystery to it, but they obviously have not done that yet. So, and then once again, they just don't have a history of firing a coordinator, especially early in the season too. So there's so many variables involved.
Right. All right, next question comes from Verdon Barzy, who we haven't heard from. Actually, it was a question here from AB, who says, post-draft, who is a free agent receiver you think that Pittsburgh should target? That pool is so, dried up. I haven't looked at it in a while. I had a list of names, as free agency began. I don't know really who's out there right now. Again, they're likely to draft somebody, and we'll kind of take it from there.
Yeah, and I haven't really looked at the list too terribly much, to be honest with you, when it comes to wide receiver overall. Let's see if there's some names out here. I mean, it would obviously be, a cheaper kind of guy, you would think, right?
That's basically all that's left, besides, I guess, Odell Beckham Jr., and he might end up in Baltimore at this point.
Right. I mean, nobody's jumping out. Did that Olamide Zacchaeus end up signing somewhere?
I don't think. He does kind of fit as a receiver, run game, jet sweep, I guess, kind of guy. So, yeah, he would fit.
I can't remember if he re-signed with somebody or not.
I don't think so. I'd have to double check, but I don't recall hearing that. But let's get through the draft and kind of take it from there.
Yeah, it probably wouldn't be anybody going to move the needle much as far as the excitement level,
All right, our friend here, Verdon Barzy, good to hear from you, says, haven't connected in a minute, but have listened to the recordings, watched Porter, and not impressed for a pick at 17. Are you? Are you impressed with Joey Porter Jr. as a number 17 pick, Dave?
I mean, look, he's got his warts and all, the clutching and the grabbing. And you and I talked this morning a little bit about the lack of, production, but I don't view that lack of interceptions in the same manner that I viewed, back when we had those conversations about Devin Bush and the lack of playmaking from that aspect. You'd really would have to go, snap by snap over the years and take a much closer look at the kind of targets when he was targeted. And as we mentioned this morning, I can't remember what the talk was about Jalen Ramsey when he came out, but I seem to remember a little bit of talk about where was the production as far as the interceptions go. And wasn't he a little bit grabby in college too?
Yeah, I think so. I have to try to think back. That sounds right.
But I mean, I don't think he's going to be the top cornerback in this class. And I understand some of the concerns that are out there, but he also is a guy that's easy to connect the dots to. I mean, because once you get past those top like 3 or 4 corners too, even though this is probably a deeper cornerback class overall, there seems to be a pretty decent gap in there.
Yeah, I would say that Christian Gonzalez will be the top corner. I think Porter's probably second, and from there, I really don't know how it's going to go, how it's going to look. I mean, Witherspoon is kind of conventionally thought as the third guy. I could see maybe somebody passing him, a Deontay Banks or somebody like that. We'll see how Witherspoon, he's got his workout tomorrow on Tuesday, so that'll be good for him to finally get out in the field for the first time in this pre-jab process.
I mean, what if Witherspoon ends up being kind of deemed the third corner in this class?
I think he fits Pittsburgh. Can play inside, outside hitter. Just is he checking those boxes in terms of pro day? Obviously,
I guess a better question is how likely is it that Porter might be deemed the second? And all it takes is one team, right? But how likely is it for Porter maybe to be considered by one team the second best corner in this class?
No, I can see that.
That needs a corner.
Yeah, I can easily. I think I'm kind of expecting Porter to be the second corner taken right now. All right.
So then you're kind of hedging in it. You think he might be off the board then, right?
Yeah, I've kind of always said it's a coin flip. I think maybe I moved towards, I guess, him being more likely to be gone than to be there. But obviously, I would not be shocked if he was at 17, just because the cornerback class is deep. It's strong, but it may not be super top heavy as it has been in the past couple of years. We had, Sauce Gardner and Derek Stingley and names like that. Got a question here. It says, hey, Alex, in general, how do you feel about right tackles coming out of the draft being played at left tackle? It's a question for the Steelers and some guys like Darnell Wright, Dawan Jones, etc. It's a valid question. It's just, to me, case by case. I don't paint that with a broad brush in terms of what guys can play left tackle, what guys can't. Darnell Wright has played left tackle before. Dawan Jones hasn't, so it depends on their feet, depends on their athleticism. I think overall, the lines have blurred in terms of the X's and O's. I think financially it's still different where right tackles get paid less than left tackles. But if you're a left tackle or right tackle, you better be able to pass protect. It really isn't that much different. If you're a right tackle, you're blocking TJ Watt. If you're a right tackle, you're blocking Max Crosby. If you're a left tackle, you're blocking Myles Garrett. So I don't think it really matters. A tackle's a tackle to me, and you better have the skill set to pass protect. If you don't, you're going to be a liability.
And nowadays they'll find you.
Yep.
they'll find you with their guy. Now, obviously, a lot less with the Steelers. It's not often that you see T.J. Watt, flip sides. But I mean, you see Myles Garrett flip sides. You see some of these better pass rushers in the league, not named T.J. Watt. Will switch sides.
Right.
So they'll find you if you're weak. So, as Alex said, can you pass protect and can you run? But are you a good tackle at whatever position you're at?
Steelers D-line coach Carl Dunbar calls it the fish of the week. Who is the fish of the week? Which is, I guess, the fish out of water, the weak link, the guy that you want to go after. And so they'll find you, as Dave said. The Pirates, by the way, up 3-0 on Boston here early. So we'll see if that lead evaporates by the time we're done here. But there you go. All right, Russ Obenstein says, what's up, Alex and Dave, and all in the chat. Appreciate you being here. Appreciate everybody joining. Dave and I will have a couple more of these until the 2023 NFL Draft. Be sure to hit that like button. Dave and I would really appreciate that. Brian Jonker, who is the most likely trade partner to trade back with and get an extra 5th or and 6th round pick? I have no idea, Brian. It just depends on the million variables we talk about all the time in terms of the board, the offers, if a guy falls. I don't know. I have no idea.
I'm having a hard enough time just trying to figure out who might be on the board at 17. Now you want me to try to predict a trade down? It's so hard. I will still stand by the fact. No, not a fact, but my speculation that I won't be shocked if Kevin Dotson is dealt at some point during this draft for, I don't know, 5th or 6th round pick or something like that.
Yeah, it makes sense. I don't know if they'll wait until more of the summer, because if you're a team, might as well just draft that guy instead of trading for him, but we'll just have to wait and see. Mark Miller does not see left tackle being a priority early unless one of the big 3 falls. He thinks they will look to add depth in the later rounds. So we'll see. The tea leaves seem to suggest potentially otherwise, but maybe they're more comfortable with Dan Moore and Chukwuma Okorafor than some of their moves here are indicating.
And as we've talked about the arm length, it'll be interesting to see. Look at the arm length at maybe a tackle, because look, if you're talking about true left tackles at this point, you talk about what Paris Johnson and
Broderick Jones from Georgia.
and Broderick Jones from Georgia, and then depending on what measurement you want to use during the pre-draft process, potentially maybe Darnell Wright, right? Because didn't we see a couple of different measurements on him? And he has, of course, played some left tackle during his college career. Now, if you deem Skoronski as being a left tackle, then his arms ain't going to come anywhere close to what normally the Steelers look for. So that's one of the things that after the fact, it's going to be, I have at least on my checklist to go right to,
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't think they view Skoronski as a tackle. I know that Meyer was at that pro day. I just don't think they're going to be that interested in Skoronski. If they were, it'd be to play guard or maybe even center. Probably more center in Pittsburgh, given what they've done at guard here in free agency. James Ellis says, if we trade up, it better be Jalen Carter. And I guess you got to get in the top 10 to get a visit with Jalen Carter these days. I still think he goes top 10, though.
Yeah, man, he's so talented. The tape don't lie, right?
Yeah, if you're talented, teams will overlook whatever baggage you bring.
And all it takes is one team. And even if he was to just slide out of the top 10, how much longer would he stay on the board at that point there? I found it a curious decision on his part to say that he won't visit with teams outside of top 10, because what happens if he does slide out of the top 10? Does he, teams would probably just outside of the top 10 would probably like to talk to him during the pre-draft visit, just to get some of the information straight from the horse's mouth and see because that's some teams, they really want to bring the kids in like that to hear it from them,
Mm-hmm.
And I just find it a curious. I understand the posturing, especially with a guy like Drew Rosenhaus as your agent and all. But to me, if you're wanting to quiet or help try to quiet some of the concerns right now, I'd say whoever wants to bring me in, bring me in.
Yeah, I think you should be open, be willing to talk to any team, not do anything that might make teams a bit more nervous. And listen, he's talented, but he's not Deion Sanders. I don't think he can sit there and tell teams who I want to talk to and who I don't want to talk to. But, it's his call, and we'll see how it shakes out on draft day. Got a question here. If I can scroll back up, Brian says he loves Joey Porter Jr. and Penn State football, but why isn't Julius Brents getting as much love? Both are similarly long, competitive.
We've been giving him a lot of love.
Yeah, I think he won't be far behind Porter. He'll be, I think, a top 40 type pick. He maybe doesn't have quite the straight line speed in terms of testing, but yeah, I think overall they profile as pretty similar guys. All right.
I know Tyler Wise and Owen were on him kind of right out of the chute,
Yeah, and I think both those guys, or maybe at least Tyler, somebody will be on for our Friday kind of roundtable, and I'm sure we'll talk about the cornerback class. Patrick Donovan, yo, what's up? Glad to be back catching y'all live. Question, what do y'all think about Canada not being at any pro days? I think that's pretty curious. I mean, I didn't expect him to be on the trail as heavy as he was last year with all the quarterback, barnstorming tour that Pittsburgh did, but thought you might see the guy in a couple of places, but a goose egg for him is pretty surprising.
Yeah, I thought we might pick him out once or twice. Now, look, just because we haven't spotted him doesn't necessarily mean that we couldn't have missed him. Now, we're pretty. I mean, it's a big game between me and Alex. But we would like to think that had he been at one, we would have spotted him. But just because we haven't doesn't necessarily mean that he wasn't at one of them.
Sure.
So. But yeah, I'm a bit. So I expected maybe we'd catch him once or twice.
Right. I mean, we've caught him the years before. We've caught OCs before, and even if we don't catch him, usually there's a reporter or Tony Pauline. Somebody says, because when they report who was there, they talk about three things basically: head coaches, GMs, and coordinators. And usually, an OC is going to get swept up in that. So maybe he was somewhere. I'm not going to say that he 100% was not. But if he was, he was hiding somewhere good, and I'm pretty confident he was not at 5 places the way that he was last year. So what does that mean? It may, to me, it would mean less about, oh, they don't like Matt Canada and they're freezing him out of this process. It would mean more their draft focus is shifted towards the offensive line, which is why you saw Pat Meyer 5 places. So even if you want to take it as meaning something, to me, it's not they hate Matt Canada. If they hated him, they would have fired the guy. It's just our focus, because Frisman Jackson didn't go anywhere either. So did they hate Frisman Jackson too? No, their focus probably is more on offensive line than it is skill guys.
Right. How many people did we spot? 80 something? Or 80 different instances, I guess?
Yeah, we got a new one after the post went up. 86 total pro days with 84 specific people identified at those 86 pro days. We also got information Ike Taylor was at Central Florida. So that was a third one for Ike Taylor. So that was
he's pretty much just stayed in Florida, anywhere close to him probably, right? Because doesn't he pretty much reside down in Florida these days?
I think so. He was at Miami, Florida, and then Florida and UCF. So it's probably kind of his territory in terms of DBs. Yeah. Logan Yawn, hey, Alex and Dave. Seems like there has been a lot of buzz around all players except Broderick Jones. Does Pat Meyer not being at the Pro Day mean anything for him not being the pick at 17? No, it does not. To me, positional coaches do not have to be at that workout for first-round picks. I think it matters a lot more for second and third round, the day 2 guys. So Tomlin, Kahn were at the Georgia Pro Day, and so I think Jones is in play. I just don't know if he'll be there. I think he has a much better chance to be there than Paris Johnson, but I would still project and mock Jones to be off the board before pick 17.
How many games did he so he started all 15 in 2022, played in every game, starting the last 4 of the regular season at left tackle in 2021. In 2020, he saw his first collegiate action at right tackle in the 4th quarter drive at South Carolina. Also played as a reserve in Missouri. So I guess he's got, let's see, 15 in 2022. He's got enough tape out there for them to probably qualify should he fall that far. I'm with you though. I just think he's going to be one of the top 2 tackles off the board.
Yeah, I would say the problems are that Pittsburgh hasn't drafted an offensive lineman early in a long time, in a decade. De Castro was the last, and taking a tackle in the first round has not happened. Is it still Jermaine Stevens as the last tackle they took in the first round? Is that still the last offensive tackle?
I think so, right?
Yeah, so that's even pre-Colbert, so we're going back a couple of regimes. And so what information is useful, it's hard to know for sure. I think Pittsburgh does like Power 5. We know that for sure. I think they do like experience in a body of work. Does Jones qualify? It's a little bit more questionable, but I think the fact that he had 15 starts this past year as Georgia wins the national title gives you some more tape. So although he's kind of a 1.5-year starter, that full year was a long year of basically an NFL season, 15 games, and that may make Pittsburgh more comfortable in their evaluation of him.
Look, that long streak of cornerback in the first round from who was it? Chad Scott finally got broke with Artie Burns,
Right.
know. So they come to an end at some point.
Right. And by the way, I had a question earlier. How quickly would Pittsburgh's the Pirates' lead evaporate? It is now 3-3. So it took about 15 minutes for Pittsburgh to give that lead up. Let's see. Next question comes from, I just saw it here about, I think maybe tight ends if I scroll on back up. I'm losing my place here. Trade idea, Kevin Dotson of the Titans for Malik Willis. I think that's a little bad knee there. I think Mike might be a little tongue-in-cheek, too. Ross says, what's your opinion on Josh Downs from North Carolina in the 4th? I don't think he'll last to the 4th. I think he's a top 50, top 60 type prospect. I like Downs' game a lot. I would not be mad if he became a Steeler.
Yeah, a lot to like there, and you don't know how much to read into it, and you don't know particularly which person said it, but he mentioned during his post pro day press conference that someone from the Steelers told him it was one of the best workouts that they had seen. So definitely you definitely could use them, that's for sure.
Yeah, he's athletic. He's good post catch. He plays bigger than his frame. He's got return value. He's got NFL bloodlines. His dad played in the NFL for 6 seasons. Pittsburgh loves that. So I know he's small. I know people will say you have Calvin Austin, but like I mentioned earlier, if Austin turns out good and Downs turns out good, then you got more good players. And that's a very simple way to look at it. But, don't make the, what someone say, don't make the simple complex. Get good players. Use good players. You're going to be good offense. Logan Yaw and Alex, I noticed you're not as high on Darnell Wright as some analysts. What did you see on tape that stuck out as a red flag? That's one guy. I've been watching more Dawan Jones lately. I want to go back to Wright before the draft starts. I just worry about some of those guys that are heavier on the edge, and can they consistently defend the edge? That's one issue for Dawan Jones, is some of those inside counters and rushes. But I know that Wright is a quality athlete, tested better than Dawan Jones, has played left tackle before, so I don't want to say that I don't like the guy. I just had that concern watching him at the Senior Bowl, taking some lumps against an athletic pass rusher like Will McDonald, and he did bounce back later in the week of practice. But there is still some concern about a guy that, how well can he move in space to defend that edge. Okay. Big Gary with a big question here, and I'm going to let you answer this one first, Dave. If your life depended on correctly guessing one player from the Steelers draft class, what player would you guess? So any other draft picks, if you had to call your shot, Babe Ruth on one name, who would it be, Dave?
Oh, Lord.
That's how I love you start questions these ways.
I mean, last year it was a little bit easier. I wouldn't say easier, but I mean, you had the whole Connor Hayward thing just sitting there for such a long time, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'll say this. I mean, I could definitely see Nick Herbig being a selection at some point. The toughest problem I have with Nick Herbig is, where does he go? Right. Is there a team that honestly believes that he can be an edge, or be an edge rusher, or kind of a guy that you can move around in the defense and you get a lot of snaps out of, along with special teams? I mean, because if so, and if you particularly think you can maybe beef him up a little bit, make an edge out of him, then the 4th round speculation makes a lot of sense. But even he said after his pro day, he agreed with kind of what he's hearing is he's going to have to move off the ball at the next level,
Mm-hmm.
And if indeed that's the case, is there a team that loves the traits and the potential of the position switch that would take him high, that high? Or then if all 32 teams believe that, look, he's got to move off the ball, then how far does he slip? Does he actually go into the 6th round at that point? I mean, I like him a lot better on the Steelers as a developmental inside linebacker guy in the 6th round than I do the 4th. But long story short, I guess if there was a guy that sitting here right now that I could see just because of the dot connecting and a lot of the obvious things, I would say Nick Herbig.
Okay. Yeah.
But I wouldn't bet my house or my life or anything on it. There's really not a guy in this class right now from what I can see so far that I would bet my life on or bet my house on,
Yeah, there isn't that name that comes to mind for me either. I'd have to obviously think about that some more, and I don't want to give away something in a mock draft, but I will say, as the Pirates are now down 5-3. My goodness, it's been going to be a tough season. We're 4 games in. I'll say Keanu Benton from Wisconsin, the guy that I've talked about basically from the onset. I know that they could go with a bunch of different defensive tackles, whether you're talking Brian Brisset, Javon Dexter, Mazzie Smith, but just something in my gut says they're going to like Benton playing up and down the line, the length, the toughness, the wrestling background, Wisconsin guy. I'll say Keanu Benton somewhere in the 2nd round.
Okay. And they brought him in for a visit today.
Yep. And so checking all those boxes. Faceless Man says, if Addison and one of the good 3 cornerbacks is left and Brian Branch is left, do you think we'd take Addison? So it's Addison versus a top corner versus Branch. No, I don't think they would take Addison. They would take either Branch or that corner before they took Jordan Addison.
There was a report earlier today, I think from Aaron Wilson, about some of the pre-draft visits that Branch has set up. And now, obviously, he could have more than just that. But the Steelers weren't on that list. You think they need to bring him in?
No, I don't think so. I think historically, first-round picks have not typically come in for pre-draft visits because Tomlin/Colin have always been there, or almost always been there, at least since 2010, and they were at Alabama this year. And wasn't Grady Brown at Alabama this year too? So they're really
he conducted the drills out there.
And we don't know this to be a fact, but I'm going to guess it was probably a pro day dinner with Brian Branch and some of those Alabama guys. So at that point, what else is there to talk about if you bring this guy in? So I'd have to research the history a bit more, but I think generally speaking, there is not a strong correlation between pre-draft visits and first-round picks because they're at those guys' pro days. All right, next question comes from Ashish Bial. I probably butchered that pronunciation, so I apologize very sincerely for that. But any updates on the Bud Dupree front? Does it seem like a deal is unlikely now? It's hard to say. According to the reporting, I believe from Jerry Dulac or whoever it was, I think it was him, that they had a physical, no contract talks. Is this a situation, Dave, where they're going to go through the draft and kind of see what they get or don't get and then circle back to Dupree if they feel like they have to still add to that edge room?
I mean, it obviously we could 24 hours from now find out something,
Sure.
But here's what I wrote the other day in that post. I think on what was it, the first or Sunday or Saturday. So I can't remember when I wrote it there. But the good news with him is when he got cut loose from Tennessee, that he did not have a failed physical designation, and you can circle that back to Tennessee as well, too, because 3 other players that they did cut did get the failed physical designation. So they probably wouldn't have hesitated to put a failed physical designation on him if he wasn't healthy, I think. And then fast forward here, a couple of weeks. Here's the other thing. I think we're coming right up now on the time. It might not even be 3 full weeks since he was actually cut either. So maybe and who knows, what were Tomlin and Khan actually back? Not that it probably makes that big a difference if they were there or not for his visits. I'm sure he knows his way around the facility at this point. How true is the report about contract numbers not being talked? I mean, we'll have to, take Jerry Dulac's word for it. Long story short, I think that there might be some potential, maybe from both sides, of saying, let's see how this goes here the next couple of weeks, because look, Dupree's market value might actually increase a tiny bit after the draft to some other teams out there. So maybe he's not willing. Maybe he's the problem here. Maybe he's the one not wanting to jump right in to a deal just yet. But on the flip side, the Steelers probably wanted to get with all their pre-draft visitors coming in and all like that, and maybe Bud Dupree's schedule. Maybe they wanted to get the physical out of the way first to at least get that out of the way in case both sides did want to jump into the deal. That could be done. So I don't, other than just knowing that he took the physical and left town unsigned, I don't know how much you can really read into that as far as probability of him getting signed or not signed.
Sure, and it doesn't seem like Dupree's market, while it could increase post-draft, I doubt it's very active right now. 30 years old, coming off a couple of rough years in Tennessee, some injury history, not going to have teams beating down your door to go sign you. So I think they want to just take all this slow. The physical was the important part. Why talk numbers before we know where you're at, medically, physically, and I doubt there's a rush to get a deal done. All right, next question. Actually, before I get to the next question, I do want to pose this question. I saw some comments kind of answering it in the chat, but to answer Big Gary's question, if you had to pick one name that you felt like was going to be a Steeler, destined to become a Steeler, who would that guy be? Put his name in the chat. I just want to see what the responses are, what some of the names are, if there is any sort of consensus, or if the answers are all over the map. Getting back to the questions here, would you envision the Steelers taking Julius Brents or Keely Ringo if both were on the board? Sure. Both were in for pre-draft visits, and so that's obviously a connection there. If you made me choose between Ringo and Brents in terms of what I think they will do, I would right now lean Ringo over Brents.
Okay.
Are you the other way on that, or you kind of no strong opinion?
I don't have a preference one of the over the other significantly. No, I'd probably have watched more tape on Brent's though. So
Okay. Reginald Rivers, do you think Witherspoon, Montravius Adams, and Gunnar Olszewski get cut after the draft? I doubt it. Rookie minicamp, maybe some veteran gets turned loose, but they'll probably carry those guys to Latrobe and take it from there.
The thing is, with those guys that you mentioned there, you don't, other than Witherspoon, after top 51 displacement, it's not like you're saving all that much money, So if you had a guy, with a much higher cap charge, yeah, I could see it. So of all those names that you mentioned, the most likely, if they were to part ways with one of them right after the draft, it would probably be Witherspoon, because Montravius Adams and Gunnar Olszewski, I mean, I'm not saying that either one of them are locks to make the roster, but what do you really save by cutting them loose when you could have injuries and yada yada? So of all those, he named three, right? Witherspoon, Montravius Adams, and Gunnar, right?
Yep.
So if you want to talk about the probability wise of one of them potentially getting cut right after the draft, I think it would be Witherspoon, and especially if you drafted a couple of corners in this draft, and with Witherspoon set to make $4 million, you subtract the whatever the displacement is, or 850,000, and also if you have enough bodies in the room, do you want to take that $4 million salary through any of the on the field off-season program, and then potentially kind of getting hurt and that kind of thing there. So I don't think I think Montravius Adams and Olszewski are both safe, at least until much, much later in the summer. Whereas Witherspoon, it probably depends on what you get in the draft and how you feel about his future moving on from there. But I could see all three of those guys lasting at least until the final cuts.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point of Witherspoon. If they draft, let's just say, Joey Porter Jr. at 17, does that kind of put the writing on the wall for Witherspoon really not having a good path to make the team? That would be the one name, because of the savings, because of the potential high draft pick, that may make a difference. But I still think Witherspoon goes to camp, because when he's played well, he's played well. Maybe get the good version of Witherspoon for some portion of time and ride that roller coaster out. So the responses here in terms of the name that we could see becoming a Steeler, it's predominantly Joey Porter Jr. The only concern there is, will he be at 17? If you had to bet your life on it, you're going to bet your life on him being there at 17. And could he be there? Absolutely. But he may not be there as well, and that's kind of where it gets dicey when you come and talk about first-round guys. All right, back up to the question. Just over 10 minutes left, over 100 people here in the chat. So appreciate you guys hanging out with Dave and I. Let me scroll back up to where I was. Let's see. Logan asking about waiting post-draft to sign Dupree. Kind of touched on that. He mentions Derek Hall. I'm a big Derek Hall fan. I would not be mad if they took him at probably 49 is where it's going to have to be. Could he slip to 80? That would be tremendous value. I don't think Hall will be the guy, but I'm a big fan of him. Thought he had a really strong Senior Bowl, as Brian Reynolds has gone yard. And so it is, what's the score in Pirates land? 5-4. But yeah, Derek Hall. You like Derek Hall too, right, Dave?
Oh, yeah. Nobody was there, though. Who was at Auburn? It was just...
Scout. Watts? Was it Chris Watts? Somebody, but not a positional coach that we're aware of.
I was kind of hoping maybe a positional coach would show up down there.
Max Shell. Who makes a bigger jump next year, Pickett or Warren? Dave, who makes a bigger jump, Pickett or Warren?
Oh, obviously hoping Pickett does. Yeah,
it better be Kenny Pickett, as much as we want to see Jalen Warren progress, and I think he will progress. It better be Kenny Pickett for the Steelers' sake.
Look, I mean, Warren did a fine job, his rookie season. I mean this positively. How much more do we have? How much more until he reaches his ceiling? What's the gap there at this point? Because we got to see him do quite a few different things, during his rookie season there. So even if he were to make a jump, what would that look like?
It's a good question. I feel like he's pretty close to his ceiling. I think obviously anytime you go from year 1 to year 2, that just the game slows down. You're not as worried about your roster spot. Obviously, you're not fighting the way that he fought a year ago. You can kind of, take it all in. Probably work on conditioning and weight and all that kind of stuff. But I think Warren he was back in Oklahoma State recently and seemed like, the NFL, it's not as bad as I thought it would be. So I like that perspective. Reminds me of Marquise Pouncey. Remember, he said similar things his rookie year. Any guys in particular in the middle rounds who you would like as a third outside linebacker? Derek Hall we mentioned, although I think he's probably more not middle rounds guy, early day 2, mid day 2 kind of guy. What other edge rushers do we like here, Dave? I think Yaya Diaby from Louisville, who played as a 3-4 could stand up and kind of be that Chicolo type, but good bend, good power, good effort overall. So I kind of like Diaby as a conversion guy.
Yeah, and the Northwestern kid, who I don't dare pronounce his name.
He's going to be a high pick, though. He could even be a first-round pick, honestly.
Yeah, Felix and a Duke Uzama.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is you go through his tape. He didn't, not that it's a huge killer, but he didn't play on his feet much of any. But he fits. I mean, everything else got nice bend, and he's got that kind of that outside linebacker kind of measurables to him. 6'3" and 8", 255 pounds. Got some long arms on him. 33 and a half. Overall, I mean, that's a guy that you could see. The USC kid, it'd be interesting to see who they brought in for the visit today.
Mm-hmm. The name Tooley T. I know you're talking about, though.
Be interesting to see, what the plan. Because he's being called a defensive lineman. Do you beef him up, or do you make him more of a? Do you ask him to drop about 10 pounds and get him kind of in that perfect range that the Steelers like and all? So I think he could. And man, he was able to get after the passer there at USC as well too. He's got some got a nice sack reel to him, I think overall. Who else edge wise?
Jose Ramirez from Eastern Michigan.
Yeah,
Lonnie
more
Phelps,
of a later
Kansas.
round.
Yeah.
Later round guy with him. Byron Young out of Tennessee is another one. A little squattier. He's probably going to end up slipping maybe into later day 2, I think.
Okay. Yeah, does Jonathan have an edge in his mock? Let me see. Let me scroll through it here really quickly. I don't think he.
It took me several weeks to get my Byron Young's differentiated, but once I did, I definitely know the edge rusher of the two now, and that's the one out of Tennessee.
Yeah, he's got a trade in here to take the Pitt kid, Baldonado, so that's what he has in his mock. So yeah, it's the edge class. It's got some names in there for Pittsburgh, no doubt about that. Xavier Robinson, as a University of Minnesota alum, I'm hoping they take John Michael Schmitz at 32. Do you think they would take a center instead of a tackle at 32, even if they don't get a tackle at 17? Kind of goes off the discussion Dave and I had at the top of the show, of the podcast. I don't know. I think if you look at the team on paper, they should go tackle before center, but based on the tea leaves of the guys they've shown interest in, including John Michael Schmitz, bringing him in for a pre-draft visit, they could still go center. So I'm kind of torn on this one.
Yeah, I'll be a bit surprised if it's a center with the first 2 picks, though.
Yeah, maybe choose. I'll say tackle still, but you can't ignore what they've been doing pre-draft and during the free agency period.
I mean, they brought in Stromberg, and they've looked at some centers now. So.
They have, yep. Logan, I know, says Alex, I know you love Darnell Washington. If teams go offensive tackle heavy before 32-49 and only that Alabama kid is left, you think they pull the trigger on Washington and give those offensive tackles some help with them and troll personnel? I'm all for it. It depends on what offense you want to be, what identity Pittsburgh wants to revolve themselves around. Obviously, they want to be run first, physical. That's kind of what they've talked about, what they've certainly shown in terms of the moves they've made. Will Washington be the guy, though? I don't think it will, but I'm not mad about it if I'm wrong.
Sign me up if it happens.
You and me both.
I'll definitely will watch the tape of that for sure. That guy's just a monster, and he can get out in space. And sign me up for that if that happens. I don't think it will, but you know me and tight ends, especially
Hmm.
ones that can run block. And man, I mean that guy has 6 offensive linemen put in his, I think, in his social media profiles there. So definitely would be fun to watch.
Yeah, definitely would not be mad if he became a Steeler at, say, pick 32. Russ
And
opens.
we still don't know what the contract is for Gentry either. So
Right.
no more quote unquote official signings came in on the transaction sheet today for the Steelers on the NFL page and all like that. So we're going to be waiting at least a couple more days to find out the details on Gentry's contract.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll be tweeted by Aaron Wilson at like 2:04 a.m. one of these nights here. Got some time for just a couple more questions. Want to get to some new people. Russ Obenstein says he thinks Omar's going to pull off some surprise moves. We'll see. You know, it's a little hard to project in a first-year GM like Omar Khan is in right now. Steve Brooks says, can Pat P transition to strong safety? I know that safety talk's been discussed, and we'll see what Pittsburgh has planned. I don't think strong safety is going to be the plan, though, for Pat P.
Yeah, lay out to him real quick your thoughts on what Tomlin said and what that likely means.
Yeah, I think, and this goes back to Tomlin and Peterson himself saying about, you know, being making Peterson more versatile, moving him around a bit, you know, playing some safety, and again, we'll have to see what that looks like. And I know that typically older corners that lose some of that speed become free safeties and make that transition. But I think what Tomlin was referring to was some of the post snap rotations Pittsburgh does, you know, inverted cover two, you know, being able to rotate Minka down to play Robert to play. You know, those crossing routes and rotating a cornerback to play safety behind. And so I think you'll get some of that safety work and kind of that structure, but I don't think it'll be necessarily pre-snap alignment or playing the Edmonds role as a strong safety or something like that. I could be wrong, but I think that's basically what Tomlin was referring to, was kind of doing some of the rotations they would do with Cam Sutton last year. All right, what else do we have here from some maybe new people in the chat? Bill Thompson, if they draft Dawan Jones or Darnell Wright, is Chukwuma Okorafor tradable, or are they really going to sit one of those guys behind him or bench Okorafor making that amount of money? I think it's Dan Moore that gets benched, but this guy, I think, to Bill's point, kind of more right tackle guys, and Dawan Jones at least, maybe Wright, although he's played more left tackle. Kind of how does that look? And I've had that question as well. I've kind of struggled with, let's say they draft Dawan Jones. How do they figure that out in training camp?
Well, here's the thing about, first and foremost, you know, the kind of a question about Chukwuma Okorafor, and I wrote about this earlier in the offseason. Look, he just had his roster bonus date pass on the 19th. So there's $4 million now that he's guaranteed from the Steelers once March 19th passed. So if they had any real want to try to move him, I think you would have seen that happen before his roster bonus was due.
Right. So if somebody gets benched to tackle, it's going to be Dan Moore, not Okorafor.
Right.
And could they trade him? I don't know if Pittsburgh's in the business of trading their tackles. Tackle depth that is so scarce as it is. And Okorafor would not be depth, but, you know, it would be Okorafor, rookie, Dan Moore, LaRaven Clark as your 4 tackles.
Yeah, and they only have 300 contract right now.
Right,
you know?
Right. And I don't want LaRaven Clark to be one snap away from playing snaps. No, thank you.
Right.
Got a couple of super chats. One from Dead Planet, $2 says message retracted, and I'm trying to see. He made a comment here about expecting a positive leap from both Jalen Warren and Kenny Pickett, and I'm in agreement on that. Also saying full offseason as a starter, full 16 games. I'd say it'd be very strange for Kenny to somehow get worse. I just don't see that. I agree. The question is not about will he get worse, but how much of a leap will that be in year 2? Hopefully it is a big leap, a really noticeable one that happens quickly, as opposed to maybe a small step forward.
Yeah, look, he had that big long article today on Steelers.com, I think by Teresa Varley and all, and a lot of as you'd expect, positive stuff coming out of his mouth. But it feels like he progressed pretty quickly along the way, and first off season, he's not having to worry about all the draft stuff and all that kind of stuff. He's been able to go down to Florida to work with some of the guys already. So, I mean, and obviously, second year in the same system, and you would expect that to hopefully progress a little bit there. So, I mean, all everything says that he should make the jump. It's just, what will that jump look like?
Right, and to what degree is going to be the question. $10 super chase from our friend Tim Chase, who says, thanks, fellas. So thank you so much for the super chat there, Tim. Just time for a couple more questions left. Is there any live mocks coming up at some point? I don't have a date yet, but they're coming. What else do we have here? Quality Colos. If Kenny does everything absolutely right and stays healthy, what do you guys see and envision as Kenny's ceiling ranked out of 32 quarterbacks when we actually know who he is with validation? That's a big, weighty question to begin wrapping things up. Yeah. I said in terms of ceiling coming out, maybe a top 10, top 8 kind of guy. The lack of elite physical tools will limit him from entering that, real tier 1 type class. And so I don't know. I don't think about these things too often to answer the question here. Since you asked it, I would say maybe, again, best case, like perfect case scenario, like a top 7 to 8 quarterback in the NFL.
I would think, just more than anything, kind of a more broader answer to that question would be, I think you definitely want to come out of this season with us saying Kenny's easily one of the top 15 quarterbacks in the NFL. And I know that's pretty broad, but let's call it top 13.
Okay.
Right? I think you most definitely want everybody in agreement, which is obviously hard to when it comes to this thing. But I once again, it's a broad painted kind of statement, but I think you easily want most everyone to come out of this next season saying, you know what, Kenny Pickett's easily a top 13 quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah, that would be ideal. And
then obviously room for improvement to continue an upward climb.
Sure. And I would say if he becomes, let's say, my top 7, top 8 quarterback, you could win a Super Bowl with him. It would take, some things going your way and a great roster around him, but that would, I think, put you in that Super Bowl contention window. A couple more questions really quick here, rapid fire. This hominid, what is Kendrick Green's purpose on the roster and why is he still on it? Because I don't really have a good reason to cut him right now. He's some depth and go into camp and, see what happens.
Yeah, he's cheap. You hold him on to him because he does have some center experience there, and obviously can play some guard and all. So it's just one of those biding the time type situations. You're probably in agreement. I don't expect him to make the 53 this year.
Yep, I'm with you. Todd Christian, heard you guys talking about Danny Smith being at pro days. Do you think they could look at a return man? I'd have to see who all was there. Georgia and Clemson, those were the 2 pro days Danny Smith was at in terms of what maybe return capable late round guys that could be there. I don't know. I just know there were a couple of kickers there, and I imagine that's kind of what was drawing Danny Smith to those places.
I would agree.
All right, let's see what else we have here. I think that's probably just about it. Jared says, a great Q&A tonight, as always, Alex. Incredible work, as always, gents. Thank you so much, Jared. We'll go out here. We'll end things on this question from Pittsburgh, Toddy86. Popeyes or Chick-fil-A? Dave, what's your choice?
Oh, man, those Chick-fil-A sandwiches are out of this world, especially without the pickle on them. I'm the guy.
Oh, you don't like the pickle?
No, I don't eat pickles, man. Never have. I'm the guy that orders them without pickles. But I do. But you know what? I haven't even had one of the Popeyes. Because there was all that fuss a couple years ago about the Popeyes spicy chicken sandwich or whatever, and I think they were constantly out of them here in Vegas. But okay. I haven't even had one. And my wife really doesn't eat chicken, but she will eat a Chick-fil-A sandwich. So we usually end up, if that's something that we eat, we usually run over to Chick-fil-A.
Yeah, I'll go Chick-fil-A too. There's really not many Popeyes, I guess, up northeast like this. I mean, I think they're kind of more southern, out your way. I mean, maybe there's some Popeyes around here, but Chick-fil-A's closer, so I'll go with that as well. I don't do spicy either. I'm very adverse to spice.
We love it. We love those. We love a lot of black pepper on our food. So we both of us like spicy.
All right. Well, appreciate you guys being here. A good turnout tonight. A lot of good questions. And so Dave and I will have a couple more of these live streams before late April's draft. I want to thank you guys for being here. You can catch an archive version of this on Steelers Depot in just a little bit. And Dave, Brian, as always, thank you for being here.
Thank you for conducting these and reading the questions and having to do the hard part of it there. And thank you everybody for showing up tonight. Remember that we're going to have a couple of these draft roundtables on some upcoming podcast episodes, and those will be must listen to episodes as well too. And peace and love, everybody.
Yeah, we'll have one this Friday and probably at least one more before the draft, and of course after the draft. And the Pirates just tied the game at 5, and so that's a good note for us to go out on. Appreciate you guys being here. You can listen to an archive version of this stream, again, as I mentioned earlier, later on Steel's Depot. Appreciate you guys being here, and we'll talk to you soon.